August 30th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field, or you can simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate, if it's relevant, which version of Cubase you're running. So if it is Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you could indicate which version number, so if it's 11, 12, 13, and which operating system, that information would be helpful. And we should have an index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. When you ask your questions, if you don't see an immediate response to the questions, if we could avoid asking kind of the same questions over and over again, we'll go through all the questions chronologically. That would be appreciated. And if you wanted to search for questions that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan for creating that website. So you could search through over 34,000 topics. We also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and Agent K, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really want to make the live stream a better community experience. And we'll give Jazz Dude a special extra kudos for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. It's the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, but that's a great resource of information with links to tutorials, videos, and written articles. That's really relevant for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I am the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It is the last live stream of the month, so that means in about 2 hours, we'll be starting our Club Cubase Zoom social. I will post it in the chat again, the link for it. But it's a great way to meet other people that are on the live streams. I always look forward to seeing new faces and seeing people who have been on for a while. So, you could just join. We'll be starting in about 2 hours. But with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so Ron Artinian asks, Greg, hope you've been well. Just wondering if you could ask team about the local undo and key editor and where that feature stands at this point. Thank you. So I did have a discussion with some of the team on it, and one of the issues in the discussion that arose was it was causing a lot of instability issues and also project file sizes growing larger. So I think that may have been why it was stopped, but I'll bring it up again to see if there's any more developments on that. All right, so we see All About Music on. We see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in the UK. We have Matt Elston. All right, All About Music is just sending love from India. We have Uno Memento from Finland. Jazz Dude points out that, the big sale that people have been wanting and waiting for a while is live. So you get 50% off many different Steinberg products. And if you are a Cubase Pro owner or Dorco Pro or WaveLab Pro, there's also a loyalty discount. So if you needed to get something like Absolute, you can get 70% off if you have one of the full licenses. So check out the Steinberg website with that. All right, so we see All About Music. What is additive synthesis? It seems like everything is basically subtractive. So additive synthesis, like subtractive synthesis, we kind of often take frequencies away from particular sounds to do that. So we'll start with like a full waveform, and then we'll take harmonics and overtones and frequencies away from that. So you're kind of starting with a full spectrum. Additive synthesis kind of does the opposite. You take the basic waveform that is not like a full audio representation and you add harmonics to it. So, and I think maybe additive synthesis was more common for some instruments that, when we had limited ROM to work with as the basis for the sounds, that you could maybe get some more sounds in less space and then kind of add different frequencies and filters. So that's why it's, not as popular as subtractive synthesis, because most people want to start with kind of a full frequency spectrum, I think. All right, wonderful to see Jan from Cubase Index on. As he was mentioning, the last 50% off sale, like this was 5 years ago. That was, for Cubase's, I think it was the 30th anniversary of Cubase. All right. All right, and we see Peter checking in from Montreal. All right, and wonderful to see Gareth Kitch on. Glad you can make it today. Thanks for sending the stems over to me the other day. All right, and we have Psycho Killa Records just saying yo. We have Tim Weinheimer joining from Mission Viejo, California. Says he's loving the Steinberg 40th anniversary sale. All right, so All About Music asks, how to get a job at Steinberg? Do you have to have an engineering degree? So I think if you are a software developer, and I don't technically work for Steinberg, but if you're a software developer, obviously knowing, most of those will be software engineers. If you're doing something like marketing, you may not have to have an engineering background. If you are, there's lots of different jobs. There's people that just write documentation. There's people that do testing and quality assurance. There's people that do support. There's people that do marketing. There's people that, come up with all of the systems so that you could enter in your code and that it is assigned to your account. So I think that's the digital unit. So there's lots of different aspects, and there's people that serve as product specialists. So there's a lot of different roles at Steinberg. You could always check the Steinberg website if they are hiring. So how I got a job with them way back when was I actually just wrote the United States Steinberg distributor, which was Steinberg Jones at the time. So I got in touch with Russ Jones and asked if he had anyone going around doing demonstrations of the software in the area that I lived, and he didn't, and he gave me a shot. And been doing it for over 32 years now. All right, so we see CL Info says, hi Greg, I have a Cubase 13. I was wondering if I could buy the upgrade code during the sale now and activate the code when a new version of Cubase is released. Would that be possible? So I haven't tested to see if that's possible, but I think that the code that you're getting, you might not be able, like the code that you are purchasing, maybe a Cubase 12 to 13 code. It may not be a Cubase 13 to whatever the next version of Cubase is. So I wouldn't chance it, but I haven't personally tried it. So, but I wouldn't chance it just on the possibility. So, all right. So we see John A. Walker on. All right, and he asks, says, apologies, haven't been on recently. No problem. It's great to see you back. Says his question is, if I upgrade from Cubase 11 Pro to 13, how big is the download? This is for a Windows laptop running 11 with Cubase on it. So when we go to like our Steinberg download assistant, so some of the a lot of the content has been updated, but you could, if you downloaded your 11 from your Cubase from the Steinberg download assistant, you'll see which components are already installed. And you could always install content to a separate drive. So say if we go here to Cubase Pro 13. So here, once you look at the Steinberg download assistant, you could see, I think from 11 to 13 that you might, there may be content updates and new versions of like Howling and Sonic, Groove Agent. So you could have Howling and Sonic instead of Howling and Sonic SE, depending, so it's a free download, but some of the content. But here, Iconica Sketch, Verve, we could see that these will, the size of each of the downloads, and you could have these, if you go to like the settings cogwheel here, if you need to install it to different locations, you could do that as well. But this will give you, and you don't have to install everything. You paid for everything, so you might as well. But here, and if you install it and need to move it to a different drive or folder location, you could use the Steinberg Library Manager to do that. Okay. Wonderful to see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, the Creepy Silence asks, has Cubase also a micro tuning feature? So yeah, depending on the instrument, so micro tuning can mean a lot. So anytime that you do like pitch bend, so let's say, just go to like a pad sound. All right, let's see if I... All right, so let me see if I can... All right, so if I wanted to come over here, and if we have, let's say, a chord in, so with VST 3.5 instruments, we could always come over here, and if we double click on a note, we have the option when we have this set to so we can say double click opens expression editor. So otherwise, if we double click on a note, we could delete it. If we have this option set here, where double click opens note expression editor, what we're able to do is to now come over here and say we will go to, let's say, note expression, and I could just say tuning. So while we play one chord, I could just take the pitch of that one particular chord and of that one particular note and do micro tuning there. So if we play this, just so we could kind of do like the individual pitch bend per note. Also, what we could do is, let me see if I can get my MIDI controller. It's not connected. Let's see if I can get it. Reconnect it here real quick. Okay, so but also if we wanted to come over and let's say if I'm playing this particular chord, another aspect that we could do for micro tuning is if we go to like a MIDI insert, that we could choose a micro tuner MIDI plugin. So here I could just say, okay, on E notes, I want my E to be sharp or flat, and I want my G to be very, so we could just, so if I'm playing a C, we could adjust the micro tuning for particular scales. So we could just come right over here using the micro tuner MIDI plugin with VST 3.5 instruments like, you know, Retrolog, Hallian, Sonic, etc. And then you can and there will be different presets in here. So if you want it to be pure, if you want it to be equal temperament, or if you want it to be pure major. So you could do micro tuning directly from there using, so check out the micro tuner plugin as well. All right, so Christian Williams asks, hello, I haven't been able to figure out how to increase velocity over a single note instead of having to add the note over and over and again, adding velocity that way. Any tips on crescendo? All right, so let's say we have, all right, so we'll take just, all right, so velocity is associated with a particular note. So the attack of the note is the velocity, but often you can't change the velocity of the note afterwards. So let's say I want to come here, and this is where we could use a different MIDI message, CC10, which is going to be, or CC7, which will be main volume. So let's say if we're listening to, so we have our velocities here. So we look at velocity. So the velocity is how loud, or like, you know, the pressure of the key. So what we would want to do if you wanted to change it afterwards is we would just select CC7 main volume, and now we could just kind of draw in different CC7 values. So we could say, okay, I want to take this and I want it to crescendo over there. So as we listen to it, we'll just hear. Because, you know, the MIDI note message itself has velocity information, so it doesn't really change after the fact. You know, think of it like striking a piano. You can't change the dynamics of it after you play the note. Maybe you could put a damper pedal, but if you wanted to do crescendos, you would need to use MIDI CC7. And depending on the instrument, if it's an orchestral instrument, maybe MIDI CC11, which is expression. So, but CC7 will pretty much work for any MIDI device as well. Okay, so we see Gareth just saying happy anniversary, Greg. So yeah, it's a great milestone for the company being in business 40 years. So I've been there for 32 and a half of the 40 years. So. All right, Vargas Panicker asks, how often are these live sessions? So we do it on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we usually go about 4 hours or until we run out of questions. And like today, the last one of the month, we usually go 2 hours and then have a Zoom social meetup. All right, All About Music asks, the advent of AI in music is demotivating sometimes and is killing creativity. How to stand out in this scenario? So I think if you want to stand out from AI, I've heard some stuff that's, would pass for like a pretty predictable track being generated by AI. It's going to get better and better, but I think, we've all read probably web articles that we know were written by AI, as opposed to like a real human person where you can tell it's kind of been extrapolated and summarized, and they come up with, particular, and it's amazing that they do that, but it still doesn't come off like someone is writing a great book. So I think that you could always, if I was approaching it and I was thinking of competing with AI, I would try to do something that, something unique that AI hasn't had time to ingest or digest and try to duplicate. And I think I would use it as a personal challenge to come up with something unique and fresh that doesn't sound like everything else. So that's how I would approach it. So I wouldn't be motivated. I would demotivate. I wouldn't be demotivated. I would be motivated to come up with better work and come up with a better product. All right, wonderful to see Benny from Sweden joining us. All right, Rebel asks, how can I get my hi-hats to play in different pitches in Cubase? Does Groove Agent have this feature? So we'll show you here. So let's say we want to add a new instance of Groove Agent. So generally, like a lot of Groove Agent kits by default will allow you to take a, like if you have a program kit, like, like each MIDI note may trigger like a kick drum or a snare, a hi-hat, etc. But if you want to play different pitches, we'll show you how to do that. So we're going to start with a brand new instance of Groove Agent. And when we come over here, what I want to do now is I'm just going to find a hi-hat sample. So I'll just type in hat. All right, so I want to take that hi-hat, and I'm just going to drag it to a pad. Now, if I want to come over here and be able to play this hi-hat from different pitches, what I could do is we'll go to the pitch tab, and we'll set our key range. So currently I'm on C1, so I'm going to say let's go to C0 up through C2. So now when we come over here, I could play. And now we could go chromatically across. So again, all you'd have to do is just come over here and pick exactly and once we go to the pitch, just set your local range. Another way of doing this is to utilize the sampler track. So let's come to our sampler control. I could take my hi-hat sample here and we'll say create sampler track. And now we could play this particular sampler track on any pitch as well. So you could do it in Groove Agent and just set the pitch range again by coming right over here, selecting the note here, select the pitch tab under instrument, activate the key range, and then you could map it to a particular pitch range right there, or use the sampler track. All right, so we see Darren Flake just wishing you a happy Friday. Thanks for joining us today. Good to see you on. All right, no question from Asfarita. Hi, Greg. When I close Cubase to do something else, the main window disappears completely and it's hard to bring it back. Is there a way to keep it again? I'm using Mac OS and Cubase 13. Greetings from North Carolina. All right, so let's say if I open up my web browser here. All right, so say we go to all right, so we're at the Steinberg site. So I would just hit Control, Tab, and then we could navigate between different programs. I should probably shut down Word. So as soon as I kind of just command on Mac, command plus the tab key, and then you could navigate between different programs and bring your Cubase windows back. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Yazian asks, I want to buy Steinberg Cubase for my birthday. Can I pay it with Ideal in Europe, or should I wait for 14? So I'm not sure when you say, can I pay for it with Ideal? Maybe it's with Ideal in Europe. So right now, I would take advantage of the current promotion. So if you wanted to get Cubase, I would take advantage of the 50% sale. I think it ends September 25th. So at that point, I would take advantage of that because we don't know when Cubase 14 will be released. And I think financially, that's the best move to do. Okay, so we see from All About Music, it says same issue with the modulation wheel and Halligan Sonic for the slots. Basically, even if it is all the way up, it has a low volume. I have to turn down and turn up again. What can be the issue? All right, so let's say if we are doing, let's see if I can, not sure why my MIDI controller isn't working. Let me see if I could. All right, so if we have a sound, so let's say we are here in Halligan. So how MIDI CC messages work, you could have this all the way up. I'm going to replace that particular sound. Okay. So if your modulation wheel is up and then you load up a particular sound, you may not, just because the modulation wheel is up, it doesn't mean that that has actually triggered that particular value. And it's just kind of how MIDI works. So you may need to actually just move to actually send the MIDI message. It doesn't matter what the state is here if there's no like modulation data. So if we move this modulation down, depending on the patch, so let's come over here to maybe a legato patch. So if we just turn that on with this state, because it hasn't actually transmitted that MIDI message to adjust the volume. So if you always want that particular, value to be recalled, regardless of what the position is, that's why I would come over here and just choose to write in the MIDI CC data. So that now we'll say, okay, I'm going to start right here. I'm going to turn the modulation down, and let's say at a certain point I wanted to, on this measure, I want it to go halfway. Let's say. So now when I play, you can see that the modulation will immediately go down for that particular track because there is CC automation data. It doesn't matter where this physically is if there's no actual CC data for it to respond to. So you might have to, actually write the MIDI CC data in, and then it would automatically play back and recall the volume set by the modulation wheel. Okay, sorry, my chat jumped on me. All right, so All About Music just says, ask how to learn about continuous controllers. There's too much contradicting info on the web. So, continuous controllers, like as we mentioned, if you kind of, have your modulation set physically in the, in the inner, like on here, that doesn't mean that that data is in the event itself. So make sure that you have these MIDI CCs written as, as MIDI information here, and then all of your MIDI CCs will follow that. But, physically moving a knob up, when you go back to play something, if this CC value is here, as soon as I hit play on this particular track, you can see that it's automatically going to follow. So if I say, okay, now I want to, just come over here, and we can make our adjustments directly here. And once we have this particular CC data in, we have the ability to, that will repeat and be automated. So if we're just watching kind of right here, watching a mod wheel, we can see this graphically. So, but yeah, let me know like what you find contradictory or confusing. If there's a particular aspect on MIDI CCs, and I'd be happy to go over it with you. Okay, Mr. Morpheus asks, hey, I have an issue. I got audio files to mix for the client. Don't know the tempo, but I import files and it's faster than the demo. What am I doing wrong? I have convert clicked. So usually if something is, so when you import a file, so it, often what it could be is a sample rate issue, and you said you had convert clicked. So make sure if you go to the preferences, to editing, to audio, that you have, convert to project settings. So make sure that you have that. But I would first see what, when you go to a project that has audio in it, you could actually see what the sample rate of the audio file is from this line right here, from the status line. So as soon as you select an event, and just make sure that your project is set to the same value. Now also it could be that the tracks, if you select all of the tracks, if you're importing kind of like stems, let's say a project that may look something along the lines where it's going to be mostly contiguous audio files, may look something like this, is a pretty common interchange format. It could be that these particular tracks, I would select all of the events and see if they are in musical mode. So if it's not a sample rate issue, it could be that it's in musical mode and it's trying to adapt to the project tempo. So, and if it didn't have particular tempo information, it could be doing that wrong. So I would select all of the events and turn off musical mode if you're importing it for the first time. And you could also go to the pool hitting Control or Command plus the letter P, and if we hold down Shift, select the top and bottom tracks, we could enable and disable musical mode right from here. So if it's playing back fast, it's either going to be a sample rate issue. If it's playing fast, it could be that you're in 44.1, 48K. So check to make sure that the files are the same sample rate. And you could also do that in the pool. You can see the sample rate for the particular file. And then also check to see if you have it in musical mode. I would probably turn musical mode off to start with. So give that a try. See Gareth just saying, here's to 40 years more. So yeah, hope to make at least 10 more with Steinberg. So, but I think it's in good hands with Yamaha. All right, so wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Don't know if you were back from vacation. I know you were planning on doing an Alaskan cruise, but we all missed your ice cream. Gareth says AI will be common for generic library music. I think that's probably pretty good assessment. All right, so we just need Pablo to join in. Gareth says just be individual, get contacts, and do what you love more than ever. So. All right, so we see all about music just as expression and volume are the same. So it could depend on the instrument. So if we jump back to, let's say, where we had the cello sound. So, you know, a lot of orchestral instruments, you know, sometimes we could think of it as being similar. But when we go to particular instruments, let's say if we wanted to swell like a natural orchestral string section. So we come over here. Let me see if we... so at this point, we could say, okay, we want to have, if we go to some of the, you know, this will kind of default to like your modulation. But sometimes when you adjust expression, what it could do is you may start with like maybe two at a lower expression value. It may be 2 instruments. And as you increase, it may go to 4 to 6 to 8 to 16 violins. So the expression will kind of add in more instruments if the library is designed that way. Often it may give you kind of the same result, but depending on how the library is set up, so you may have volume that controls the volume, an expression that kind of brings in more of the same instruments. So you can have something that's kind of very intimate, like a quartet kind of sound, and then as you move the expression, it could just, you know, it could switch between different layers of samples to include samples including more instruments combined together. So so they often could do the same thing, but it really depends on the instrument design and how it's set up for that. You can see Gareth is saying Pablo is waking up after a year of night shifts. All right, so we see YPE, who just says, hi Greg, sometimes when I audition audio in a right field files, it plays double times. Can I change this? So it could really depend on what the original tempo is of the file. So let's say if we wanted to jump over here, so if it's playing double time, you know, if you want it to play back at its original time, what we could do is we'll just come over here, you know, and so let's say as we go to audition different sounds, let me just check my... So, you know, if we have this button turned on, this will automatically play back the loop at its original tempo. So let's say my tempo here is 100 beats a minute. Now when I click on it and we go to audition, it's going to play back to match the project tempo. So some of the loops that are set for musical mode that have the tempo defined, if this button is turned on, that will automatically preview the loop at the project tempo as opposed to its original tempo. So check to see if you had the same behavior if this button is disabled on the preview area of the Right Zone Media Bay. Oh, so wonderful to see Pablo on as well. We have a full hot mess contingent. And we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. Gareth says if we say Pablo's name 3 times, he appears. So everyone's happy. All right, so we see Connor Casey asks, "Hi Greg, can you please show again how to map plugin parameters to MIDI controller? I can't get plugin parameters to move to the parameter number and therefore encoder that I want to control it with." So this is where like the MIDI remote comes in super handy. Let me get my little Chord Nano control out here and in position. All right, so when we have your MIDI controller configured as a MIDI remote device, so let's say I come over here to my Chord Nano control, I'll switch my mapping page. All right, so let's say I want to go to a plugin parameter. I'll do it on this track. So let's say we load up an insert. So some plugins will allow you to just immediately map. But let's say if I come over here to do like a multi-tap delay, and when I come here, we could open this up and we want to add a module, and I want the envelope filter, and I want this parameter and the envelope filter to be mapped to a control. So really all I'd have to do is, let's say I want to map it to this knob, is I would just right click and we'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. So I do that, I move the knob that I want to control it, and I click apply mapping. So now when I move this particular knob here, that parameter is automatically mapped directly to it. So set up your MIDI controller as a MIDI remote, and then you could literally just kind of right click and say, okay, I want this knob, move the knob, click apply mapping, and now second knob is controlling that parameter, first knob is controlling this parameter. So it's a great way of just taking like, banks of knobs and quickly assigning it to control software elements and software parameters just like that. So take the time to set up your controller as a MIDI remote, and that will simplify the whole process. Let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay, All About Music asks, can you explain a little on the flatten chain under Arranger track? All right, so let's take a look at it. So the Arranger track is going to allow us to take a, we can think of it as taking a particular linear arrangement and then turning it into a non-linear arrangement. So if you wanted to take like a song idea and work with different arrangement ideas, this is a great tool for that. So let's come over. Okay, so when I'm here, we can see that I could define different sections. So say this is our bridge, and I like this section within the bridge, and I like a little break within the bridge. And once we go to our Arranger track, we could see that we have, so if I start here, and we'll activate the Arranger track when I hit play. Instead of it playing linearly across, it's going to jump to different sections. So then we could have multiple play orders that we could switch between. Now, when we want to export this, what we want to do is to be able to flatten the chain. So this is going to take our arrangement that's jumping around between different sections. And when we say flatten chain, what it's going to do is automatically create an arrangement that is a linear representation of the particular Arranger track that we had. So again, that's going to basically take all these different arrangement changes and turn it into a linear arrangement. That's what the flatten chain does. All right, I'm going to post the Zoom meetup link one more time. I'll try to do it every half hour. Sorry, I missed the first half hour. All right. All right, so we have Jovanovic 3D checking in from Sylvania. He says, happy anniversary. He's getting the Dorco Pro 5 from the loyalty deal. The last missing software from Steinberg. That's great. See, Pablo's wishing happy birthday to Steinberg's family. Yes, I think Steinberg's having a kind of a party in Hamburg next week, a week from today, to celebrate. All right, so we see Pablo just saying he wants some loyalty for Groove Agent libraries. So, you know, Groove Agent libraries do go on sale throughout the year pretty regularly. So, but this is obviously pretty attractive promotion. So, all right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Uno Memento, also from Finland, wants everyone to whack the like button, which Pablo has done very succinctly. All right, Brian Sawyer Senior sending greetings from a tractor in the middle of a field bush hogging in Duplin County, North Carolina. Sounds like fun. See, Pablo's happy. Michael Teens is here. We have everyone in a hot mess. So that's great. All right, All About Music asks, when we render MIDI to audio, we can't modify unlike MIDI notes. Why is there a need to render everything to audio? So if you have let's say I have a virtual instrument and I need to pass it along to someone and they don't have the same virtual instrument. So I could send them a MIDI track, and this particular virtual instrument, let's say, is like really kind of a part. Let's say this is a key sound in the song, and I need to pass it on to someone else and they're doing some other work on it. It's a collaborative thing. Or I want to make sure that this will always sound the same, because it could be I used an instrument, and then I ran into this with a project with the group, the Lumineers, where they had an instrument that they used in Nuendo 2, and they wanted to, and they had the MIDI data, but the instrument doesn't work in the later operating systems. So they had the MIDI data, but they didn't have the actual sound, which is really key part of the song. So I was able to kind of dig up an early version of Nuendo, and I could now come over here, and when we render that particular instrument, that now we have that sound of the instrument captured, because it could be that, maybe the plugin company goes out of business, and we don't have the ability to actually, that plugin won't install. It's only a 32-bit plugin. But now if I've rendered it, I could just have the audio of that particular instrument always captured. That will always be represented, because audio files will probably play back. A WAV file will probably still continue to be played back 50 years from now. This instrument plugin may not be able to. So, and we get this all the time. It's like, oh, I would love this one organ instrument, but the developer stopped in 2005. Why doesn't it work? And all of my tracks I use that on. So with that, you could kind of future-proof your projects and render them to audio through like a render-in-place functionality. But, we don't have the flexibility of, you know, editing individual notes. So I will always do all of my MIDI editing, and I will always keep my MIDI track in case I want to play back through a different instrument and adjust MIDI stuff. So that's why the render in place is really good, because we could now come over here, render it, have it as audio, but still have this source material if we want to change it and have it play back through a different instrument. See Michael Teams, very excited to see Pablo. Wonderful to see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Glad you can make it today. See Michael Teams is back from vacation and he has refilled the ice cream truck. Sounds great. He's warming up from his Alaskan cruise. See Michael Teams says he's going to get absolute 6 today. So I know Best Green Jesus was waiting for the absolute sale, so we'll see if he pops in today. All right, so we see from Rebel, does Cubase have stem separation? So you get a tool which will allow you to separate vocals. So you get Spectral Layers 1, which will allow you to separate vocals from tracks. And if you want it to have, you know, more separation of the other instruments like guitar and bass, at that point you could just get Spectral Layers Pro. And then at that point, we could, and I'll just show you kind of an example of Spectral Layers Pro, what his work is. So it's not part of Cubase, but with Cubase you get Spectral Layers 1, which will allow you to unmix vocals. And the Spectral Layers Pro, you're going to be able to unmix, you know, most of the instruments independently. I'll show you just an example of it. I think it's arguably the best algorithm for separation. So we'll just take this, and this is kind of pre-done, but just give you so I just went to the modules and we choose unmix song.
Can I say to you, never meant to fall head over heels. What can I say to you?
So if you want to come over here and say,
inside I was happy with the
so if you wanted to even come over here and say, okay, I want the drums louder on this. And even with, so with Cubase, you get the Spectral Layers 1. So even now what we could do is just drag the vocals over to the track. And now this will automatically extract the vocals from this track.
She walked in my life, my mind went astray. Like a love at first sight.
So if I wanted to now just EQ or add more effects on the voice. So let's say I want to come over here, let's add like a delay.
Inside I was happy with a face full of tears. Had to come see you, couldn't settle for less. I couldn't believe when she said.
So now I'm just putting new effects on the vocal that was extracted from the original mix.
Never meant to fall
So phenomenal stuff that you could do with spectral layers. All right. All right, so you see Michael Teams has some new ideas for new hot mess record. All right. All right, all about music. Just ask, do we ever automate the main stereo out track, say for a fade out at the end of a song? Yeah, so it's pretty typical to do that. And one of the things that is kind of made it a little easier is every time that you start Cubase, you have an input output channels. So if you wanted to automate the fade out here of a particular track, that we could just come right over here. And if we watch our master fader, as we do this, we can. So we'll watch our master fader, and we get to hear. We'll just see it start to fade out. Here we have a perfect linear fade out. So, yeah, so if you wanted to do that, you could automate the fader itself, or you could just go to the input-output channels and draw in perfect linear fades that will be more accurate than anyone's finger could ever be doing it manually. All right, so we see Daniela checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us from Bochum, Germany. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Oxford. Right. All right, so we just say I have an intro and a chorus in this from All About Music. Say I have an intro and chorus in the arranger track. I want to play the intro once and the chorus twice, but with the addition of a hi-hat in the second repetition of the chorus. Can arranger help here? So, if you're going to have variations in it, the arranger probably won't help you too much. But let's say, so I'll come here. What you could do pretty easily. So, the arranger is going to play back an absolute amount of time. So let's say we have, our chorus here. So, and let's say we have an intro and I want to take like a verse and I want to have a variation. So I'm going to hold down Control or Command and we're going to globally select this. I'll go to my range tool. And then we could just kind of insert silence. And then what I want to do is to take, this particular range here. So I'm going to take this. I could select the range and hold down my Alt or Option key, drop it in here, and then we could just easily add another part right here. So if you want to do like the first variation without anything, then I wanted to add hi-hats here, but the arranger track is going to play everything within this particular arranger, within this particular range of time. So, it's not going to be where if I repeat this twice that I could have the second time play hi-hats differently. So. Okay. All right, so we have Jay from Secret Studios. Hi, Greg, 2 questions. When I try to export my plugin library from Plugin Manager, it doesn't export as XML but text. How do I XML? So, the intention is that it will give you like a printout of all the status of all of your plugins. So when we come over here, we can go to our plugin report. I'll save it to my desktop for now. So I'm not sure why you would need an XML file versus the text. So let's come over here. When it does it, it will just find it here quickly. So this gives you the, like all of the plugins and information as a text file. So, but, let me know if there's a particular reason you need XML, but this is just kind of like an informational report, like a kind of a snapshot of the plugins that are on your system. And that's why it's text, so it can be freely available and viewable in just about any source. Okay, the second question is, any way to target behavior from instrument plugins with the project logical editor? So, it's not necessarily going into, like different plugin parameters. Is not really the design intention. So like, if we wanted to modify MIDI data in kind of with Boolean editing and Boolean conditions, that's when we could utilize the MIDI logical editor. But the project logical editor at this point, it doesn't really get into different plugin parameters. So, but more on elements of the particular project. So, realize that with the, 14 million VST plugins, it could be hard for us to know which parameters are going to be in any particular plugin. But let me know if there's like what you want to do with in a VST instrument with the project logical editor. All right, so we have DJ C Clear checking in from Zimbabwe. Thanks for joining us. Wonderful to see George checking in from the road again. Okay, his question is, it's been a couple versions since going over how to split MIDI keys across multiple VSTIs. Has that process changed? So it's really kind of the same. So we could set up kind of a, let me just set it up. So we can set up a input transformer. All right, so I'm just adding 3 different instrument tracks. So if you wanted to set particular key ranges, all you'd have to do is if we go to we could select the track, and under the routing tab in 13, we'll see the input transformer. So I'm just going to do this on this particular track. We'll open the panel. And now we could say we want to come here. We'll say, let's filter out MIDI notes. And we could say where we'll say subtype, which is the pitch, is, we'll say, less than C3. So this won't play any pitches beyond C3. And if I wanted to go to the next track, just for simplicity's sake, I would just come over here. Then we could say I want these to be inside range C3 through C5. So now we could filter out notes between those particular range on another instrument. Or we could say that is bigger than C5. So once you have the input transformer on each of the tracks set appropriately, at that point we can just simply, use the input transformer, and that will automatically filter out the particular MIDI notes on any instrument from going in. It's great to see you on, George. Thanks for joining us again. Okay. So Connor Casey just says, hi Greg, thanks for a tip. How does it work for pages in a remote control editor of the plugin? Example, I want peak reduction on black valve to be parameter 5, but it won't move from parameter 3. Okay, so let's say we add an audio track here. And we'll open up black valve as an insert. So we'll just do this directly here. Okay, so every plugin, so if we have this also set up for my MIDI remote setup, so I have these set for quick controls. Okay, so now I'm going to use this knob. So these are focus quick controls, so we can make adjustments. I'm going to activate this particular plugin, and by default, we can adjust kind of quick control 1, 2, 3. So let's say in your example, you want so you want peak reduction on parameter 3. So by default, that this is parameter 3 with the focus quick controls. But if you need it to change it, if you come to the plugin itself and click on in the upper right hand corner the QC, you could change any of those. So let's say I want the wet dry mix for parameter 3. I could come here, I could click on parameter 3, I can move the parameter, and now that parameter is now assigned. Or if I want this parameter to be assigned, so these may be set up as quick controls. So at this point I could just say, okay, I want to come here. So I have my quick control, I want to click on learn, I move the knob, and now we could have the drive set up here on parameter 1. So now as we move the knobs, we could just freely assign these as we see fit, just by, if you're using the focus quick controls. So the focus quick controls may be overriding if you have quick controls set up, but you could also just come here and say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. I'll move this particular knob. I'm going to change it from the quick control to that particular plugin parameter, just like so. And if I want to go back to quick control, I'll come over here to my focus quick controls 3 and apply the mapping. So let me know if that makes sense. So you could do it via quick control so that you could navigate quickly between any of the plugins, or if you wanted that to be dedicated, you can just do the apply mapping, and you could change the order of the quick control assignments. All right, so we see Flyv says he can't wait to Zoom, but he's not in his studios, and his parents with 2 laptops and a TV screen. So yeah, join us anyway. Doesn't matter where you're at. So. All right, so we see from All About Music, can MIDI gate replace the sidechain compression? So I don't think it would replace it. Sidechain compression is going to be actually triggered. The MIDI gate is just going to turn the signal on and off. So But sidechain compression is going to be driven by another source. So let's say if I come here and we solo this drum loop. All right, so playing that drum loop soloed, we're going to come over here to my MIDI gate. Let me just put that in loop. Sorry about that. All right, so we come to my inserts. I'll come over here to dynamics. And we go to MIDI gate. So this is actually just going to be when I create a MIDI track. And we'll say the output is going to my MIDI gate. Just find the... Sorry, let me just... All right, so add MIDI track. So this is just going to kind of turn this on and off, whereas compression is going to take that particular, it's going to be compressed based upon the actual... All right, so we go to sidechain. And here we're going to choose, let's see if it's, okay, so here's our MIDI gate. So now as I take this, we will play back this source. The MIDI gate, when we open up, will, at this point, when it has MIDI notes, we can hear the sound. So we could take an existing track and have a MIDI source turn on and off an audio track. So there's lots of creative uses for that, but it doesn't compress the sound. So a sidechain will often do compression so that like a kick drum could compress another source so that the kick drum comes through more in the mix. So they're, similar concepts of how it's communicating and routing, but different purposes. All right, so we see Marco Polix says, hello, Greg, Jazz Dude. I record, produce, mix, and master in Cubase 13 spec layers. I just bought WaveLab with the thought of leaving all the mastering to it. Are there advantages? Yeah, so WaveLab's going to have a lot of advantages. One, you could just do batch export to multiple file formats. It's going to allow you to do CD burning. It's going to allow you to do all of the metadata. So I think that there's a lot of advantages. And if you have Cubase 13, check out the loyalty voucher that's in your My Steinberg account. You can get a great deal currently on WaveLab. So Flyv had an awesome birthday yesterday and Cubase today. Perfect. So congratulations and happy belated birthday. Hope to see you on Zoom. All right, so we see Barn Door recording. Lawrence Koch, sorry. It says, hi, heading to Seattle and Vancouver this weekend. Any suggestions on a great music store to visit or other music things to see there? So in Vancouver, if you're in Vancouver, Canada, check out Tom Lee Music. It's a great music store. Or not Tom Lee. Tom Lee Music is good, but the Long and McQuaid in Vancouver is a really stellar store. I've gotten to do a couple seminars there. In Seattle, check out American Music. This is kind of like a great neighborhood music store, guitar shop. You can talk to Phil there. Tell him I said hi in the keyboard department. But that's like kind of the, probably been there since the 70s. Great neighborhood, so check that out. But check out Long and McQuaid in Vancouver. Maybe if there's anyone else that lives in those areas that has suggestions, they could also pass it on. All right, All About Music asks, what are the key steps to follow before taking your session to a mix engineer? So I think preparation is always good. One thing is, make sure everything is labeled. So there's nothing worse that my mix engineer friends hate than they get like 30 tracks of vocals and no one has done a comp on it. And they have to kind of wade through and make musical decisions on the vocals that probably should be done in advance. Make sure that your session is organized. Make sure everything is labeled, and make sure routing is clear. Come over here and, have track notes, So if you come and use the notepad, so if you just want to come over here and you could say, so as we open up the notepad, you can say this was, Vox AC30. We say, Strat. And, you say SM57 off axis. And you can say, okay, this one is the Strat Direct, so that they could do reamping if necessary. So, you could make notes here, and then if they're not smart enough to be running Cubase or Nuendo, you could actually come right over here and export all of the notes. So we could just say we want to export the notepad data. Have the verse, chorus labeled. Try to make everything so that they don't have to spend an hour, or if you're going to a professional mix engineer, you're paying them by the hour, so they could sit there and organize your project for you, and it's something that you could do and save a lot of money doing it like that. And you could check with the mix engineer and say, what can I do to make it easier for you? So if you take all the assumptions out, like, don't assume that they want to go through and find the particular things that work musically. If you have all MIDI stuff, they may not have the same instruments. They may not have the same plugins. So maybe render with the plugins, say this is what I was thinking, but also have the raw tracks there so that they could use their own tools to emulate or try to create, and so that they could create what you're trying to do if you're not there. So those things, and keeping your session clean, make sure you don't have like excess files, like missing files that are being referenced. So those are some things you could do to make it easier for the mix engineer. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Elion from Martinez, California. All right, so we see from Mr. Morpheus, Greg, can I simulate a console by having two master faders independently? Thanks in advance. So I'm not sure how that's emulating or simulate a console by having two master faders. So usually, so what you can do is, if you wanted to, some consoles will have a control room section. So if we have a project, we could have our master fader here. And then if we're utilizing the control room, if that's configured using our audio connections and we activated the control room, so we could have kind of our gain structure within our mix and then our monitoring volume independently. So let me know if that's what you want to do or what you need, why you need two separate. Most consoles will have, like all the mix. So this is kind of the gain structure of the mix, and this is the gain structure of your monitoring volume, and those could work completely independently. So a lot of large format consoles will allow you to do that. But let me know if you have other intentions with that. All right, so we see Nick has made it after being on a train for most of the day. So. All right, Rebel says, I can only get the left side to play chords on the chord pad. Can I enable all the keys to play chords? So you can. So let's look at the chord pads. So when we look at our chord pads here, we turn them on. We could actually kind of pick and choose like what actual notes. So we have these kind of starting on C1, but you could change that. So, you could have that kind of set up. So if you click on kind of the MIDI setup, so, and if you want to add, let's see if I find it quickly, but we could also change kind of the player settings. Let me just... But we can actually, all right, so when we come here to pad layout, here we could choose the number of pads, but we could choose it to be a grid. So if we say, okay, I want this to be 4, and, so I could have 64 different notes that would trigger different chord pads. So again, you can, if you come right over here to the settings, you could switch between keyboard and grid, and if you wanted to start on an A or E, how many different pitches you want here. So I think you go up to 64 or 37 keys there, or 64 using the grids. So you can use the whole keyboard if you want. So you could set how many keys they're going to be triggered from the chord pads, and if you click here, which key the sequence starts for triggering the chord pads, which MIDI note they respond to. All right, so we see from Metin Han, can you play a one-shot sample from Groove Agent across different notes pitches after dissolving the MIDI part? If so, how? All right, so let me just... So it could depend on if you're doing it from an acoustic agent kit or a beat agent kit. So the acoustic agent kits will be kind of fixed. So let's say I have an acoustic agent kit here. And now so let's say if I dissolve this part, so we'll go to MIDI, and dissolving part, we're going to separate the pitches. And now each of these will go into their own instrument. But when we open up the instrument sound samples will still be fixed. So that's probably, not necessarily with an acoustic agent, but a beat agent kit we could do. So let's come over here. Let's say a beat agent kit. I'll just open this up. We'll drag a pattern over. So now when I go to MIDI and we choose to dissolve part, we'll separate the pitches. So now anytime we open up one of these, we could go to our pad. I could say we want to take those particular pads. So let's say I want to keep this snare. So I want to take all the pads from there, and let's cut pads. Then I could take this particular snare sample. I'll just cut these two as well. So right click, cut pads. Again, come here in the beat agent kit. We go to pitch, set our key range, activate it, and now. So whereas an acoustic agent, they're kind of tied together because that's how the instrument was created. You know, when you hit one drum, you know, that snare can impact the sound in the room mics and being picked up in the tom mics and overheads. Where beat agent kits, you could do that quite easily. So once you separate the pitches, the one sample you want, we can select all the other pads, right click, cut pads, and then we want to come select the instrument, go to edit, to the pitch tab, activate key range, and then you can set it as needed right there to have different pitches. You could also take the one particular sound and drag it into the sampler track as well. All right, so we see Steinberg asks for crash logs in case my session crashes. What action is taken by Steinberg on the log? So it allows them to kind of trace back what is potentially causing the crash. Like I had a friend that was running into problems, and it was like one really expensive plugin that he just purchased that was causing it. So sometimes it could be just a plugin that's misbehaving, or when a plugin does, you know, is playing a particular pitch. I've seen some plugins crash with that. So okay, so we see from Jovanovic 3D, I have a box version of Crossgrade to Cubase Pro 11 license with dongle. What can I do with this? Can I donate this license to somebody? So let's see. So you have a box version of Crossgrade, Cubase 11. All right. So I'm not sure if you have used that license to go up to Cubase 12 or 13. You know, I guess someone else could do it, but they wouldn't be able to update beyond that. So if your license says, you know, it may say Cubase 11. You know, so if it indicates that, you know, it's the I'm forgetting the exact terminology, but that's a non-upgradable license. I think that you're not entitled to sell it. You could probably, you know, you could check the Steinberg resale wizard, but if you hand it off to someone, that other person may not be able to utilize it. So if you haven't used the license, I think you could pass it on or sell it, but you could check the Steinberg resale wizard on the website. All right, so we see from All About Music asks how to create whiplash sounds using Retolog. So I'm not sure what a whiplash sound is. Maybe if you want to send me an example, we could maybe create it. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to see if we could recreate that. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup information. Wonderful to see Randy Lee from Texas. Glad you could join us today. All right, so we see Nick saying, hey, Greg, I accidentally upgraded to WaveLab 12. I haven't actually activated the license yet. If I waited for a while, WaveLab 13 maybe appear, and I might be able to upgrade automatically to that. So I think it might work, but I haven't tried it to give you a definitive answer. So I know that the e-licensors, that was a kind of a popular upgrade technique, but I'm not sure if it's going to work with the new Steinberg licensing. I think it might, but I can't say for certain. But check out WaveLab 12. There's a lot of great stuff in there. All right, Darren Flake just asked, hi Greg, can you demonstrate WaveLab Pro? What's the different tools and Cubase meters reading is better for mastering? So we'll take a quick look. Okay, so when we want to come over here, we'll just say, okay, so let's say first we'll have our album. So let's say I have an album section. So you'll have a phenomenal plugin called Master Rig that's just kind of part of it. And this is, a combination of where we could have, dynamic EQs, multiband, we have multiband compressors, different saturators, dynamic EQs, compressors, multiband imager. Each of these particular plugin slots, these racks here, we could choose whether we want to do processing. A lot of times in mastering, you may want to only do processing on the mid of the panning spectrum or the sides, or if you wanted to do mid side, left, right. So we could have different plugins that are going on. When we go to look at waveforms, we could have kind of a something that's super useful is kind of like a rainbow. So we could actually see by the colors which frequencies are potential like sibilances. We have kind of two different modes of working in WaveLab for the most part. So one would be where we could actually just kind of see, our waveform. We could have the rainbow, but we could also see spectrum editing, do wavelet editing. And we could also choose to, when we're doing editing, so when we want to come over to like our stereo editing, so let's say we jump back to this particular file, we have our waveform, but we're pretty used to seeing kind of left, right. But here what we could actually do is look at like our mid side as well. So if we wanted to do editing on mid side processing, we could do that. So I'll open up this project here. So instead of just seeing it with my left, right, I could actually now say, okay, as we're listening to this, I want it to take my sides, not the middle part, but my sides, and I can say, let's just come over here and let's just add some gain to just the side. So we'll say, okay, let's make it +6. So it's kind of an exaggeration of what you could do, but I could do independent processing just on the mids or the sides. When we go into like your different metering options, we could also just see, our level meters, loudness. We have kind of similar, we have your phase scope here. So some of these tools you could get in like supervision, but you also have access to like all of your metadata. And once we get into, like, let's say I want to come here and we'll look at like my CD. So let's say, okay, all these are, I want these all to be, these are different tracks, but they're different levels. One of the things I could do is actually just select a particular event. And then if we wanted to go over, we could do what's called a meta normalizer. So we could actually just even come here and say, okay, I want to adjust the loudness for the whole montage. So we could actually just come over here, start. But we could actually set these to the integrated loudness. We could say, okay, we're going to do our different options here for the whole range. We could set the values for absolute. We could have this automatically delivered for Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, SoundCloud, to make it compliant with EBU R128, Netflix, or Amazon Music standards. So all these different delivery formats we could automatically process for as well. So just a lot of being able to treat. So, if I want all these to be like this level, we could go to the meta normalizer and we could say, okay, the clips, I want it to match the selected clip. So we'll just say we could set it to specific. So at this point, we'll say match the loudness of the active clips. If we apply, now all the other tracks will be normalized to match this level so that you have consistent volume between the different sources. And then when you go to actually render, you may have to render, multiple different formats. We could come over here and do a multi-render and choose to come over and say, okay, we want to have this automatically export to 32-bit 192, 24-bit 192, 2496, 2448, 1644 1, 1648 to MP3 to AAC to, and this way we could just say render and it would automatically spit out all the relevant file formats that you have set up. So those are some things you could do in WaveLab. And again, if you're a Cubase user with current loyalty, if you're a Cubase Pro user, it's a great time and it's on sale as well. So it's a phenomenal tool to use for your productions. All right, so we see Michael Teams just got Absolute 6, loading it now. And Nick is saying Absolute 6 is awesome. All right, Randy Lee asks, hi Greg, can WaveLab be loaded as a VST in 13? No, but what you can do is actually run it as an ARA extension. So let's say if I'm here, I could actually just select this track. If we go to extensions, now I could just say, let's go over here to my WaveLab ARA. And now when I double click on the file, we're actually now running WaveLab within Cubase. So they run as two separate programs, but you can run them concurrently through an ARA extension, just like how we would access spectral layers. All right, so Darren Flake just says, got WaveLab yesterday, more fun for me. So yeah, it's great. Okay, so George Nowick just says, seconded on American Music in Seattle. So he lives in the Seattle area. Thanks for chiming in. All right, so we see is Michael Teams' wife Sylvia's birthday yesterday. Wish her a happy birthday for us. A happy belated birthday. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right. Okay, Marco Polix asks, hi Greg, is there a shortcut to open inserts from the selected track? Maybe if you have 5 FX inserts, shortcut 1, open the first one, shortcut 2 opens the second. So there isn't a way to do that currently. I've kind of asked for it myself, but I think if we come over here, so let's say if we do a couple of different plugins here. All right, I'll just close the GUIs here. So it's not a keyboard shortcut, I know, but I think if we come over here, and I think we go to Edit and hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, that will open up all of the plugins on that particular track. So Alt or Option plus Shift and click on the Edit. Then all of the plugins on that track will open. But there currently isn't assignable keyboard shortcuts to open insert one on selected track, etc. So, but I've asked for it, so, and others have as well. All right, so we see George joining from Germany. Great to see you on. All right, Nick has heard rumors, and the word on the street is that applying pressure to the like button increases your Cubase knowledge. All right, George's question is, could you briefly show how to add the tap tempo function to the status line at the bottom? My Cubase Pro 13 doesn't show the tap button. So probably what you need to do is just to right click, and then you may just have to come over here and you'll see probably the tap tempo. All right, so let's see if it's under tempo and time signature. So you might have to, where you see these three dots. All right, so let's see. So we have the tap here. So let's just try right clicking. Let's see if the tap is. It might show it under tempo. So try right clicking here and tempo and time signature. And then the tap tempo should be visible right there. If sometimes some of these may be over, depending on how many functions are active, you could right click, and then if we just choose to come over here and I move this up, so let's say I want this to go to just to the right of my transport controls, that we could change the position right there. So again, just kind of right click, and then you could make the adjustment right there so it's visible for you. All right, so we see Gerald Ely says expanding the number of keys in the chord pad is his tip of the day so far. All right, so we see All About Music says, this question, say I play a C major on bar 1, a D minor on bar 2, T guitar, the D minor would sound muted sometimes, it would not ring. What could be the reason? All right, so let's see if we could just recreate that. So it could be maybe the notes are hanging out. Let me just, I think I have it from last live stream. I have a guitar track kind of loaded up already. Okay, so let's open up, say, our T guitar part here. All right, so say All right, so make sure that you're careful that like these particular MIDI notes aren't maybe overlapping like from the first chord. So I would really kind of just check the lengths of this. So let's say you're doing C major, so I'll just keep the same intervallic relationship here. So check, either the beginning of the notes or the end of the notes isn't kind of hanging out. So I would kind of check those particular things, or make sure that also, like, if you move the notes for the chord, that there aren't other notes hidden underneath. So sometimes, depending on your MIDI controller, so let's say if I move these notes, so let's say if we have something like these, like this scenario, so there could be underlying notes as well, so check that and make sure that there's no notes underneath that were accidentally recorded maybe in a previous take. And those are some of the things I think that could cause those chords not to sound as expected. Okay, so we see from Daniel, says a quick question for you, Greg. What kind of laptop would I need to make music with Cubase? For a normal user, 10 to 12 instruments, no more than 20, looking for something cheap that would still work. So I think probably, even like I have just kind of an old i7 with 16 gigs of RAM that can do way more than it should. It's probably 10 years old, so sometimes you don't need like, the most contemporary laptop. Get like an i7, i9, get 16 or 32 gigs of RAM if you could do it. But, I've had this one i7 laptop. I could do like, I've done up to 100 tracks on it, and it's nothing special. It's just, a generic laptop. So, but there could be, just check to make sure you don't need a special graphics card. You don't, just err on the side of fast drives, a decent amount of RAM, and a solid processor, and I think you'll be in good shape. And make sure to shut off all the power management stuff as well. All right. All right, so Martin just says he just purchased WaveLab and Steinberg's 40th anniversary sale. Congratulations. All right, I know we had a couple questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. All right. Just let me open up the document quickly here. Sorry about that. All right, so the first question we had, open up project, show it. And Gareth always loves when I play this particular project. All right, how to fix timing issues on multi-mic'd guitar recordings. All right, so let's say we have like a couple guitars. Let's say our lead guitars here. keyboard. So we have two different recordings and we want to kind of fix timing issues, and we're going to do this using free warp. So the first thing we want to do is anytime you record audio into Cubase, it's going to have hit points that are automatically assigned to it. So I'm going to go to my audio menu, let's go to real-time processing, and I'm going to say let's create warp markers from the hit points. So now I'm going to go to my warp tool and we're going to enable free warp. So now all of my markers, so let's say we have like a mic'd or like two microphones, two mics and a DI, we could select our different tracks. And let's say if I want this to fall on beat 4, what we could do is with the free warp tool, so we'll select our warp tool, put it into free warp mode. I can move where we see this yellow line, this yellow vertical line where it turns white. Now I could just kind of move these, and then we can move kind of both clips, and we could, if we have snap turned on, we can just kind of come right here and have it snap directly to the beat. So we could just say, okay, let's come here, and then we could just select, since both of these are selected, we can move these together so that we can have these snap directly on the beat to the grid. All right, another question. So we see in Cubase 12, is it possible to have Q-Link enabled by default? So I think that there could be a lot of consequences for, you could, I think if you started, maybe if you saved your template with Q-Link enabled, but that could cause a lot of other problems inadvertently if you're not thinking about it. So let's say, if you had multiple tracks selected and you moved, let's say you had a track that was way offline here, like, a number of tracks down, and, we have Q-Link that we're accidentally changing values. So I think it's a better function, and it could cause a lot less problems and a lot less unanticipated results by strictly enabling Q-Link. All right, hang on just 1 second. I'll get something for my son. Hang on, I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so second question. In the rack, is it possible to see the EQ parameters as buttons instead of sliders? Okay, so let's open up. All right, so we go to our EQ section. You can see this. So let's come over here, and if we go to our EQ settings, we can see that we could have it as sliders or knobs. So if we have knobs, I think that in the rack here, that this is always going to be sliders, but when we click and we open up the EQ, and this may have changed it in 13, that if we had it set to knobs, it'll be knobs. And if we're doing that from, let's say if I have this selected and if I open up the EQ here, it's going to be knobs. So if I have the sliders selected in the EQ settings, that now when I come over here to the rack and I know that this is in 13 and not 12, that we see the sliders. But again, if we switch the EQ settings here to knobs, that when we pop out the EQs here in 13, we can see that. But so you could try that in 12. I know in 13 that'll work for kind of the channel settings right there. All right, I'm going to paste the live stream link one more time in the comments here. We'll be moving over in just about 3 minutes. We'll see if we get our question or two in. All right, so we see George just asking Hail Mary question. Any chance the Portico plugins being updated for Mac Silicon Native? You know, so those are plugins that were developed by Yamaha for and sold by Steinberg. So I'm not sure if they will make the if they will change the licensing. I know that they're still working on changing some of the licensing stuff with the hardware. So I haven't heard of any plans, but I'll check again. I may know in about 2 weeks after a meeting. So. Okay. All right, see if we get in our. Okay, reading through comments. See, Gareth just says, hope you didn't miss Mike much while he was on his travels. We did. We missed Michael and all the great ice cream. All right, so with that, we're just about at time. I'm going to start the Zoom meeting. All right, we see Nick joining. We'll give it a couple minutes, have people migrate over. All right, we see Sable. All right. All right, we'll just give a couple more minutes. See Benny joining. have Hama joining. Gareth. Daniel. Hey Jan, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey Jan, how are you doing? Fine, thank you. Yeah. Are you sitting in Helsinki? No, in the middle of Finland. Town named Mikkeli in the city of in the middle of Finland.
All right, I'll wait another minute and I'll exit the live stream and migrate over to Zoom. See, John Koskin just wrote he may make the Zoom meetup later, so. Okay, so I'm going to close out the live stream. All right, how's everyone doing?